I want you to just picture a landscape that's been completely transformed. You've got this brown, almost oily blanket of mud over everything, twisted metal sticking up, and huge ancient trees just uprooted and thrown aside. This is the aftermath of a massive weather event, Hurricane Helene, and it didn't just hit the coast, it roared inland, triggering these just devastating landslides through the mountains of western North Carolina.
You see that raw power, that destruction, but the real trauma, that starts when you realize your whole life's investment, your home, it's rubble.
And you're still on the hook for the mortgage.
Exactly. For a structure you can't even safely step inside, that's the moment the natural disaster becomes a personal catastrophe.
And that feeling, that utter devastation, compounded by just being stuck, unable to move forward, that's what we're focusing on today. We're exploring what happens when the vital safety nets, the federal agencies designed to help people recover, are stretched beyond their breaking point.
And the consequences don't just stop in one community. They ripple out across the whole country.
Yeah, even challenging the very stability of American science.
It's really a study in extremes. You have extreme weather hitting extreme policy shifts, and that forces people to make these really extreme decisions.
Welcome to Meteorology Matters, the podcast that dives deep into the science, chaos, and stories behind the weather that shapes our world. This show was created by meteorologist Rob Jones. Now, let's get into today's episode of Meteorology Matters. Okay, so let's look closer at that devastation from Hurricane Helene. This was back in September of 2024. And the tragedy was really defined by water and earth just moving where they shouldn't. Landslides, floods, they ravaged these inland areas.
And that's the thing. These were families who, unlike people on the coast, rarely faced mandatory evacuations. They were caught completely off guard.
And the financial toll is it's hard to even comprehend.
Yeah.
We hear about people like Elizabeth Clark, a neonatal nurse. Her home's foundation was completely wrecked. Over a year later, she still owes $270,000 on a house that's, well, it's unlivable.
So her choice is what? Ruin her credit or keep making payments on a ghost property? It's an impossible situation.
So the natural response for these families is to turn to the federal government's voluntary buyout program. It's run by FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
And it's supposed to be a win-win, really.
Right. It helps victims get the pre-storm value of their home so they can move on, and it makes sure that risky piece of land becomes permanent open space. You reduce future risk.
And this isn't some new experimental initiative. The research we looked at shows this has been a critical tool for decades.
Right. Since the 80s, they've acquired something like, over 43,000 properties?
Exactly, across almost every state. So it works, but, and this is a big but, it's never been fast.
Never. I think the median time is something like 5 years, right? From application to closing.
About 5 years, yeah. Which is already a painful wait for a family in limbo.
But the situation in North Carolina after Helene, it suggests the system hasn't just slowed down, it's had a total breakdown.
A complete breakdown. Over 800 storm victims applied for these buyouts.
And the state officials, they really tried to speed things up. They processed nearly 600 of those requests and sent them on to Washington for federal approval. That was by December 2025.
And the number of those 600 applications that have gotten final federal approval?
Zero. More than 13 months after the storm, hundreds of families are just trapped in this financial and emotional limbo.
Yeah, you see the real human cost in stories about couples like Carrie and Steve Harrow,
Mm-hmm.
both in their 70s. A landslide it literally devoured their home.
And now they're in counseling for trauma, just struggling for some kind of closure.
And that indefinite pause, it's a profound psychological burden. The research really emphasizes this. Carrie Harrow said it perfectly. She said, it's like if your mother died and you couldn't bury her, you can't complete the mourning.
Wow. It puts it in perspective. The whole recovery process is stalled because that final step, that safety net, has just vanished.
Mm-hmm. And even officials are frustrated. North Carolina's governor called the federal paralysis absolutely unacceptable.
Well, it is. I mean, he pointed out the simple, devastating fact that families are paying mortgages on destroyed homes while they wait and wait.
This is so much more than a bureaucratic hiccup. It's a critical failure.
So why? That's the question. Why this unprecedented backlog? Even if the process is slow, why the total silence?
Well, we know from policy experts that a program like this, it requires dedicated, specialized federal staff. You need people reviewing environmental compliance, property values, making sure all the legal boxes are checked.
And if those experts aren't there,
The entire system grinds to a halt.
okay, so let's connect this failure directly to the broader policy landscape.
Right.
We've said these delays are way worse than typical red tape. And the research we've synthesized points to something much deeper, the active destabilization of the federal agencies themselves.
That is the crucial distinction. What the research clearly indicates is that the system wasn't just neglected, it was intentionally compromised. The studies highlight these deep staffing cuts and, critically, this pervasive uncertainty about the mission of these life-saving agencies.
And we have to be really blunt here because the research insists on it. We have to connect these impacts to the current administration. We are talking about the effects of policies from the presidential administration led by Donald Trump. This paralysis is happening right now.
Right. And this is where the research gets into the mechanisms of that destabilization. The studies document the creation of something called the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE.
DOGE, right.
Right.
The White House framed it as this major cost-cutting crusade.
But the operational effect was just hollowing out agency expertise.
That's right. The administration's focus, according to the findings, was on disrupting what was already there, ripping up contracts, issuing hiring freezes.
And searching for keywords in grant applications, things like climate change, DEI, or even the word women, with the goal of just terminating projects that didn't align with the president's priorities.
So instead of focusing on science and disaster readiness, all the internal energy of these agencies was being redirected to navigate this ideological chaos.
And the research shows that even after DOG was formally shut down, its mission was basically institutionalized. It just kept compelling science mission agencies to change their grant review process to prioritize the president's agenda.
This had a huge cascading effect. I mean, agencies like the National Science Foundation, the National Institutes of Health, the research documented how they fundamentally changed how they allocated money.
They ended up giving out 20% fewer grants, but they were forced to pay out more money up front, essentially rushing appropriations to spend funds before the fiscal year ended under these constantly shifting rules.
You can actually quantify the damage to their capacity.
Yeah.
By December 2025, the research shows that over 200,000 civil servants had left the federal workforce.
Not all fired, but through attrition, through these targeted policy shifts, they just left. And that includes thousands of crucial staff. Nearly 5,000 from NASA, 600 from the National Science Foundation.
And so many others from the agencies directly responsible for weather, for climate, for disaster response. I mean, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. When you talk about those 600 buyout requests stalled in Washington, the lack of staff isn't some abstraction. You need procurement officers, environmental review specialists, legal teams.
And if those roles are empty, the applications literally cannot move forward. They just sit there.
So the conclusion that the researchers draw is, it's stark. The very mechanisms that are meant to protect the most vulnerable, disaster-hit Americans are being crippled.
Crippled by intentional cuts and ideological redirection. And the analysis suggests a clear pattern. The system is prioritizing political aims while neglecting the poor and middle-class populations that are being hit by these increasingly extreme weather events, like Helene.
So if the government is tearing apart these life-saving agencies, who's left to bear the burden? The research points to a massive, and I mean accelerated, exodus. An exodus of skilled workers, of academics, of wealth, all leaving the United States.
The anxiety is just palpable. There's this phrase being shared all over professional communities online. The new American dream is leaving America.
And the numbers back that up. The volume of Americans formally moving abroad. It doubled in the first quarter of 2025 compared to the year before.
Yeah, and it's not a fringe movement. 4 out of 10 Americans say they're actively interested in leaving for a better life.
And for younger people, for Gen Z, that number is more than 6 in 10. It's huge.
It really goes beyond politics. It's becoming an economic and a scientific crisis. The analysis shows 3/4. 3 out of 4 research scientists at American universities are actively considering moving outside the country.
These are the people who once saw the U.S. as the absolute center for global innovation. Now they're worried about a future that seems to be actively rejecting scientific inquiry.
And this has created a huge opportunity for other countries. I mean, they're not just sitting by. You have countries like France launching the Safe Place for Science program. They're essentially sponsoring American scientists.
Sponsoring them.
Yeah.
Including those working in critical fields like climate change research, whose funding or security was threatened by the current administration.
They're being treated as scientific refugees.
Yeah.
We see these respected, decorated professors, including leading experts on fascism and authoritarian regimes, choosing to move their entire research operations to places like Toronto.
They're seeking intellectual safety abroad,
And the future talent pipeline is being cut off, too. International student enrollment dropped by about 17% this fall.
which is attributed mainly to shifts in immigration policy and anti-DEI policies on campuses. And that has a real quantifiable impact. It could cost the U.S. economy $7 billion a year.
And the loss of skilled professionals isn't abstract. You see these online communities for IT consultants, architects, engineers, all actively planning their exit, using their resources to find a secure path out.
But here's the starkest difference the research identifies. The class divide in who can actually escape. While the middle class and the poor, people like Elizabeth Clark and the Hayos, are stuck waiting for a FEMA buyout that might never come.
Yeah.
The very wealthy have a plan B, a reliable one.
Right. We're seeing this booming business in what they call golden visas.
It's basically an insurance policy against domestic instability. High net worth individuals are not waiting around. They're investing huge sums to purchase residency or citizenship in stable foreign countries.
We're talking about mid-career professionals paying upwards of 750,000 euros for Maltese citizenship.
Which gives them the right to live and work across the entire European Union. Or, for a smaller investment, 250,000 euros, buying property in Greece for a residency option. They're betting against the long-term stability of the United States.
And the research emphasizes this chilling class segmentation. Those with the means are securing an exit. Those who depend on the social safety net. They're left devastated by the failure of those same institutions.
And the economy suffers in the long term, too. The loss of retirees' spending power alone could remove a $1.5 trillion economic footprint from U.S. communities.
So when you synthesize all this information, you see the failures in North Carolina aren't isolated incidents. Not at all.
They're deeply connected to this broader national policy of destabilizing crucial federal agencies.
Which in turn fuels this exodus of the skilled workforce and the wealthy capital the country really needs to manage future challenges.
It's like when expertise and science are treated as liabilities instead of assets, whether in science policy or disaster mitigation.
The consequences fall hardest on the people who need government support the most.
The researchers consistently emphasize that in America that rejects its scientific capacity, its cultural blend, it stands to lose its global economic edge.
And more importantly, its practical ability to respond to increasing threats, especially those coming from the Gulf of Mexico and elsewhere.
It just brings home the urgency of these decisions, especially as meteorology becomes more and more critical. The inability to properly fund or staff the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or FEMA, it's not some abstract budget cut. It's Elizabeth Clark potentially losing her career and home to foreclosure. It's the Hayos unable to find closure after their paradise was destroyed.
And this cycle, according to the research, is just profoundly self-reinforcing. If you cut the funding for the science, that predicts the next storm.
And you cut the staff for the agency that cleans up the last one.
The uncertainty and chaos that follows naturally drives away the talent and wealth that the country needs to recover.
Before we wrap up, if this particular story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, follow, comment, and rate the podcast. It really helps us continue to bring you these kinds of analyses. We want to leave you with this provocative thought built on the research we've explored today. If the country's most talented professionals and its wealthiest citizens are actively seeking an exit strategy, what does that imply about the stability and resilience of the American homeland for everyone else when the next storm hits? You've been listening to Meteorology Matters, created by meteorologist Rob Jones. If you want to keep up with the latest in weather science, you can follow meteorologist Rob Jones on Instagram @Meteorologist and on TikTok @TV Meteorologist. Head over to YouTube and follow Rob Jones Hurricane, where you can also find the Meteorology Matters podcast playlist. Thanks for listening, and remember, meteorology always matters.